Matthew Evans, a wealthy man in his late 70s, sat alone in his silver Mercedes, tapping his thumb impatiently against the steering wheel as the air conditioner hummed, barely holding back the Kentucky heat. Retired and comfortable from a life in finance, Matthew was used to things going his way, but that afternoon he found himself stranded on a quiet country road with a flat tire, far from the comfort of his pristine mansion on the edge of town. He had tried calling roadside assistance, but with no signal out here, there was nothing to do but wait. Frustration simmered until he noticed a figure walking toward him. A boy, maybe 13 or 14, in a faded t-shirt and worn sneakers. The kid approached with a determined expression, his eyes narrowing as he examined the Mercedes before giving Matthew a polite but confident nod. "Got a flat, sir?" the boy asked. Matthew felt a mix of relief and unease. "Yes, I do," he admitted. "I was hoping for a bit of help, but no phone service out here." The boy smiled easily. "I can help with that. My grandpa taught me last summer." Without hesitation, he crouched beside the tire. Matthew gestured to the trunk and the boy retrieved the tools and spare, moving with a quiet confidence far beyond his years. Matthew stood silently, humbled in a way he hadn't felt in decades, watching this stranger work. In minutes, the job was done. The boy dusted his hands off and smiled. "All done." Matthew reached for his wallet, pulling out cash. "Here, take this. I really appreciate your help." But the boy raised his hand politely. "Thank you, sir, but I don't need anything. Just happy to help." With that, he turned and walked back down the road, leaving Matthew stunned, the money still in his hand. Alone again, Matthew slipped the bills back into his wallet, but something inside him felt changed. That night, sitting in the leather armchair of his study, surrounded by shelves of books he never read, his dinner untouched on the table beside him, Matthew couldn't shake the memory of the boy. He had met thousands of people in his lifetime, partners, employees, investors, and every interaction had involved an exchange, a negotiation, a price. But this boy had offered help for nothing, only kindness. He thought of the worn shoes, the faded shirt, the dust on the boy's hands, and yet remembered the dignity and integrity in the way he carried himself. The image replayed in Matthew's mind like a quiet echo. The next morning, he couldn't resist the pull. He returned to that stretch of road, searching. He stopped at gas stations, diners, asking strangers if they had seen a boy matching the description. Hours passed until at a small cafe, an older woman wiping her hands on her apron said, "Sounds like you're talking about Elijah, always helping folks around here. Lives with his mama in Harlan." Matthew repeated the name silently, Harlan, an hour's drive into the foothills of the Appalachians. He barely noticed the scenery as questions filled his mind. Who was this boy? What kind of family raised him? The town of Harlan was quiet, lined with modest homes and small shops. After asking around, he was directed to a small house on the edge of town. It was worn but tidy, the porch sagging slightly with age. Matthew parked and hesitated, wondering what he'd even say. Finally, he knocked. A woman in her 40s opened the door. She looked tired but kind, her eyes sharp and curious. "Can I help you?" she asked. Matthew cleared his throat. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I met your son yesterday. Elijah? He helped me with a flat tire." Her face softened instantly. "That sounds like my Elijah. Always helping folks," Matthew nodded. "I just wanted to thank him properly. He wouldn't accept anything yesterday." She smiled gently and stepped aside. "He's out back. You're welcome to wait." Matthew entered the small home. The furniture was old but clean, family photos and hand-drawn pictures covering the walls. It was nothing like his mansion with its sterile perfection, yet somehow it felt warmer, alive. He followed her to the backyard where Elijah was repairing a fence. The boy looked up, surprised. "Hey, mister," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Matthew felt oddly nervous. "I wanted to thank you again. You helped me when I really needed it, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it." Elijah shrugged with a genuine ease. It wasn't a big deal. But to Matthew it was. The two stood quietly for a moment, the boy leaning against the fence, watching him with a calm gaze that made Matthew feel almost judged. At last Matthew said, "I don't think you realize what a big deal it was. People don't usually help strangers without expecting something in return." Elijah tilted his head, puzzled. "I don't see it like that. If someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I?" Matthew was struck by the simplicity. He looked around the yard, noticing the patched fence, the uneven grass, the old swing set leaning with rusted chains. It was clear this family had little, yet they made do with quiet pride. He turned back to Elijah. "You've got a good head on your shoulders. Your mother must be proud." Elijah grinned, glancing toward the house. "She works hard. I just try to help out where I can." Matthew fell silent, his thoughts drifting back to his own childhood in a modest home not so different from this one, with parents who worked tirelessly to make ends meet. They had taught him hard work and perseverance, lessons he had once lived by but had long since traded for wealth and status. Standing in that yard, he felt both nostalgia and regret. The boy hadn't just fixed his tire. He had reminded him of something far more important. "I'd like to do something for you and your family," Matthew said at last. Elijah straightened, his young face cautious. "We're okay, mister. We don't need anything." Matthew shook his head. "It's not about need. It's about what's right. You helped me, and I'd like to return the favor." Before Elijah could reply, his mother stepped onto the porch, drying her hands with a dish towel. "Elijah, come wash up before lunch," she called, then glanced at Matthew. "Would you care to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome." The invitation caught Matthew off guard. He wasn't used to such simple, open sincerity, but he found himself nodding. "I'd like that." Inside, the kitchen smelled of fresh bread and roasted vegetables. The table was small, surrounded by mismatched chairs, but it was set with care. Matthew sat, feeling strangely out of place in his tailored suit. Elijah washed his hands and joined them, smiling as though nothing about this moment was unusual. They talked as they ate. Elijah about school, his friends, his dream of becoming an engineer. His mother about the town, the neighbors who looked out for one another. Matthew listened intently, realizing that for all his wealth, his mansion had never felt as warm as this modest home filled with conversation and laughter. After lunch, he turned to Elijah's mother. "You've done a remarkable job raising him. He's got more heart than most people I've ever met." Her eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you. He's a good boy. Life hasn't been easy, but we've learned to appreciate the little things." Matthew nodded, already thinking. He didn't want to overstep, but he couldn't just walk away. This family had given him something priceless, a reminder of what mattered most. He left their home that afternoon with clarity he hadn't felt in years. Driving back to his estate, he began to plan. This wasn't about charity. It was about honoring the boy's selflessness and the quiet resilience of his mother. They deserved more than patched fences and sagging porches. The next morning, Matthew made calls to old colleagues and contractors. By midday, the plan was in motion. Within a week, trucks arrived at Elijah's house. Crews unloaded supplies as Elijah and his mother looked on, stunned. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. Matthew's reply was steady. "You've done more than manage, you've thrived. But you gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Let me give back." Elijah stood beside her, unusually quiet, his expression thoughtful. Matthew crouched down to meet his eyes. "You taught me something, Elijah. Helping people isn't about money, it's about showing up. And I want to show up for you." Over the following weeks, the house transformed. The porch was rebuilt with solid wood, the roof repaired, the old swing set replaced with a new one. Inside, the walls were painted, the floors polished, the kitchen fitted with modern appliances. Elijah tried to help at first, carrying planks and sweeping, but Matthew insisted, "Your job is to enjoy being a kid for a little while." Still, Elijah couldn't resist hovering nearby, his eyes bright as he watched the workers measure, cut and build. One of the crew, a burly man named Joe, noticed his interest and handed him a tape measure. Soon Elijah was asking questions about tools and construction, his curiosity sparking smiles from the workers. Matthew watched from a distance, pride warming him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something real, something meaningful. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Elijah's mother stood on the new porch, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just a house anymore. It's a home. I don't know how we can ever thank you." Matthew shook his head softly. "You already have. You reminded me what life is supposed to be about. Family, connection, purpose. I think I should be thanking you." The final day of renovations felt like a celebration. Neighbors stopped by carrying gifts, fresh bread, jars of jam, a potted plant. Children laughed as Elijah raced around, showing off the new swing set in the freshly painted rooms. The once tired little house now radiated life. Matthew leaned against the porch railing, watching, joy filling him in a way wealth never had. Elijah's mother handed him a glass of iced tea. "You've done more than fix a house," she said gently. "You've given us hope, and I think you've found something too." Matthew nodded. "I have. I spent years chasing money and status, but none of it ever felt like this." As the sun set, Elijah joined them, his face thoughtful. "Mr. Matthew," he said, "I've been thinking. I want to do something like this one day. I want to help people too." Matthew rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You already have, Elijah. Your kindness started all of this. Don't ever lose that." They sat together, watching the sky fade from gold to orange, a quiet peace settling between them. When it came time for Matthew to leave, Elijah and his mother walked him to his car. Their smiles, hers warm with gratitude, his wide with youthful joy, were etched into Matthew's memory as he drove away. He realized this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. In the weeks that followed, Elijah's curiosity bloomed into a passion. Matthew arranged for him to shadow the workers who had helped rebuild the house, and the boy soaked up every lesson eagerly. Matthew found himself returning to Harlan again and again, each visit less like a trip and more like a homecoming. He was no longer an outsider in their lives. He was part of something bigger, and for the first time in many years he was truly content. It had all begun with a boy on a country road who stopped to help a stranger. And in the end, that small act of kindness had taught an old man life's greatest lesson. It's not about what you have, but what you give.